Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 100 Santa Claus cosplay build. So this was a build that I used in October just because I thought the pun was pretty funny, and now I wanted to bring it back for the holidays. I also wanted to give a huge shout out to Iced Estes for being the Rudolph companion to this build. But yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into what's going on here. So this is going to be level 100, as I said, with 55 Vigor, 27 Endurance, and then everything else just poured into Dexterity. So that's going to be 48 Dexterity, but we are using Militant's Prosthesis, which gives us an extra 5 points. As for the weapon, we'll be running the Bloodhound Claws, which are going to be lightning infused, and we'll also have Cragblade as well as Raptures of the Mist. We'll also have a Rickety Shield for parrying, and that'll be useful, but we're not going to use it too much. As for the armor, we're going to have the Sage Hood, the Fire Prelate armor, no arms actually, and then Bullgoat Greaves. So you could use Blood-Soaked Manchettes if you want to change the Rotten Wing Sword insignia over for the Claw Talisman, but for this weight load, I opted to go for the Rotten Wing Sword insignia as well as Millicent's Prosthesis to boost successive attacks, and then Bullgoat Talisman as well as Crimson Amber Medallion, which brings us to one-on-one poise, which is a great poise breakpoint. Because the claws are going to be lightning infused, I went for the Lightning Shrouding Crack tier. You could also go for the tier that boosts successive attacks just to further boost that, but then we also have the Crimson Bubble tier to restore HP when you're close to death. The moveset for the claws are actually going to be really strong, and they got a big buff in patch 1.08, so there's now increased poise damage to the claws as well as faster attack speed and faster recovery time after attacking. And this results in probably one of the strongest moves in this particular moveset, which is the running heavy attack followed up by a uncharged neutral heavy. So you're just going to run and press R2 and then press R2 again. And if you poise break your opponent, then that's going to be a true combo, which can result in upwards of 1,000 damage on this level 100 build. To make it more likely that we'll land that true combo, we'll be using Cragblade. So this is going to increase the amount of poise damage we do. We'll also increase our AR for these weapons a little bit, and that's going to make this true combo pretty common to land, and you'll see that throughout the showcase. You'll also have really solid jumping heavies, and then the neutral lights are just going to be very good as well. So they come out very fast, and oftentimes people will think they can trade into them. They'll get poise broken in the process, and then just start taking tons of damage, especially with our successive attack boosting talismans. It can be just really deadly of a combo. But yeah, the backstep attack is also pretty good. The jumping light can be a nice mix-up, but I don't use it too much, and I also recommend delaying it a little bit. You don't want to be having that hitbox show up too high off the ground. So that's going to be nice, and it's just, if you don't want to go for the jumping heavy, a good move to go for. But yeah, that's going to be kind of the bread and butter of this moveset. The crouching attack we're probably not going to use too much. It's not too bad, but really the true combo of the running heavy followed up by a neutral heavy is going to be probably the way to go. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build and the strategy. I also wanted to mention, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. Also, a big shout out to Iced Estes, who was the Rudolph companion in the 2v2s for this showcase. And yeah, that's all I've got, and let's go ahead and jump into the invasions and 2v2s. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have the 3v1 in the Catacombs, and here I apply the Cragblade buff really early on. This is kind of the way I like to start the invasions with this build, is to drink my Physic and get Cragblade applied, and that's just going to be really helpful for poise breaking opponents throughout the duration of the fight. So we have somebody with the Giant Crusher, and I've kind of gotten early jump on them, literally and figuratively, and I'm able to poise break them and then guard break them as well and get the riposte. So that turns it into a 2v1 very quickly, and that's going to be really nice. Cragblade fist weapons are very strong for sure, but they are really, really good in one-on-one situations and a little bit less good in multi-opponent situations, just because you need to be up close and personal to one individual, and they don't really have any large sweeping damage that can, stun lock multiple opponents at the same time. So that is something you need to be aware of, and that's part of the reason we're running this on a pretty high poise build, is just we don't want to get our own attacks interrupted, and if we can't isolate our opponent, we want to be able to still be able to do some damage in the process. So you can see there I got a true combo with the running heavy followed up by the neutral heavy on the player with the dual Omen Cleaver killers, and that's going to do a bunch of damage, but it wasn't enough to really take them out completely. So what I'm trying to do now is just use the staircase to continuously isolate these players. So if I can get them kind of funneled down the stairway, they're less likely to both simultaneously be attacking me. They're probably not going to be like synchronizing their attacks such that I'm in front of one and behind the other and they're both attacking at the same time. I think it's pretty hard to coordinate that when somebody's like running back and forth around you in a narrow spot. So that's kind of the strategy that I'm employing, and here I get some quick attacks in, and then I'm able to finally finish off the player with the Omen Killer Cleavers and just quickly kind of start shredding the host there. And I felt like it was kind of the time to do that because I knew a blue had been summoned into the world. Next up we have a 2v1, and this is not really going to be a display of skill so much as it is just a really fun moment in the Santa Claus cosplay build showcase. So we have two players that are both using the Ghost Flame Greatswords, which are pretty good, but they aren't really using them super effectively, and they're both fat rolling. So that's kind of why it's not really a display of skill, but it was just a nice moment. So the goal here is to get this lone host down to pretty low health and then go for a very specific finish. And this was a moment that happened during stream. This particular finish that the host receives here, it was requested in stream, and they're like, yeah, you're definitely not going to be able to do that, and I managed to. Plus it was in the Consecrated Snowfield. So here we do get a kill with the Jingle Bells, which I just thought was really funny, and a nice aspect of this build. Shout out to Iced Estes for suggesting using the Wraith Calling Bell as kind of a tool within the Santa Claus cosplay build. So there we did get a kill with it, and that felt pretty good. Next up we do have a 2v1, and this one I almost died twice. Here I just kind of applaud their effort for using some ladder strats that are pretty I don't know, a little obnoxious. You can kind of tell by their builds that they're a fan of the bleed, and that's definitely alright, but it bothered me a little bit. So here I was hoping to stun lock the opponent out of that Ash of War, and it really didn't go badly, or it didn't go well. So I start switching over to just kind of running away from that particular Ash of War. It did get nerfed in one of the previous patches, so it's not as strong as it used to be, but I do manage to kind of keep my health up and not die. I really almost died a couple of times here. So now that I'm Scarlet Rotted, if you do get Scarlet Rotted while you're low on health, definitely prioritize healing yourself over using the boluses. You can definitely die while going into your menu to get boluses, and it's more optimal to just use your flask. So here I try to use them on the ladder. Something you can't do, you can use them if they are in your quick swap bar, but not if you're going in menu. And then the Rivers of Blood user does fall off the ladder while trying to Ash of War spam me, and I'm able to get a jump attack on them. So now they're pretty low health, and at this point I felt like it might be worth it to go for some more stylish approaches with the finish. So I switch over to the parry shield, and I do botch one parry, which was a little bit unfortunate. There, it was a predictive parry that I thought they were going to be aggressive, but they weren't. However, they are using Rivers of Blood, so that gives me a great opportunity to go for the weapon swap riposte and just kind of get the finish there. So kind of a funny duo, definitely a close fight, just with all the bleed buildup and the rot breath, and managed to come out on top and get some style points kind of in the process. So that was pretty nice. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one I was, I would not say sure that I was going to lose, but I was not super confident in how I was going to do. So you have two weapons that are a great counter to this build. Full Bull Goat on one player with a halberd and a fingerprint shield, and then we also have another player with a spear and a fingerprint shield as well. So claw weapons are really useful when you can poise break your opponent, and the kind of two mix-ups that we want to go for are the jumping attacks and the running heavies, and both of those are kind of countered by these builds because you can knock me out of the air with the halberd because it has the overhead attack, and then you can also just kind of block and poise through the running heavy attack true combo. So that was definitely a problem to some extent, but we were able to get some decent amount of chip damage. I was also trying to frostbite them in the process just because it would make, the kind of burst damage you get with successive attacks that much more powerful. So that was kind of part of the strategy there. We do see the Bull Goat player go for an Ash of War buff followed by a weapon buff. So all in all, kind of scary. But here I go for a straight backstab. And that ended up working out really well, getting their health pretty low. And then I'm just trying to avoid attacks from one player while managing to get a jump attack on the Bull Goat player. And then once it's a one-on-one situation, I definitely felt like I was kind of in the driver's seat and could be pretty effective. The poise you get during shield pokes has been reduced, so you do much more stamina damage. So that didn't exactly come into play there, but that was something that was going through my mind in association with patch 1.08. Is just I was more likely to poise break my opponents, or guard break rather, while they had their shield up and were poking. So next up we have a 2v1, and this involves some players. I throw some snowballs in their direction, managed to frostbite one of them but not both of them, so I throw one more and managed to get a nice free aim there on the player with the dual lances. And we also have a rune arced host, so between these two players it's pretty formidable, but the Santa Claus build is actually very strong. So here we managed to get a jumping attack on the dual lance player, and I know that if I let them kind of get some space and return to neutral, they're gonna really be able to do some high damage on me. So I'm really trying to stay very aggressive with them, and fortunately the host is not putting up too much pressure, so I'm able to eventually get in a couple quick attacks and take care of the lance player. And now it's just a one-on-one with the host. Frostbiting them initially was also useful in terms of the damage output that I was able to deliver, so that was definitely a nice moment there. And then here we get a backstab on the jumping heavy that the host goes for, which was definitely nice. They're pretty low on health, and they go for another jumping heavy, which just opens them up to another backstab. So just kind of a good delivery of quick damage output within that invasion. Alright, so next up we have a 2v1. And this one was kind of rough at the beginning to start with. I had kind of walked up to them a little bit slowly, and they seemed like they might just kind of be chill, so I thought I might have an opportunity to buff, but then we get a lot of lightning being sent my way. So we got Bolt of Gransax coming in as well as Thunderbolt. So I'm trying to let them burn some of their FP, just kind of stay back, be able to roll both the lightning and the Bolt of Gransax, but then we get the switch over to Waves of Gold, which definitely is something to look out for. I think I've gotten slightly better at rolling it. Obviously, there's only so much you can do with the desyncing issue, but I find if I roll a little bit later than I think that I should, I'm less likely to get hit by it. So, it's hard to be sure if that's just I've had better connections with people recently or not, but that's kind of my general advice around it. But oftentimes there's almost nothing you can do. So they do switch back to Bolt of Gransax, which is pretty nice, because I think if they had kept sending Waves of Gold my way, I would have been in trouble. But I do start to use this tree kind of as a barrier against them and a way to avoid the Thunderbolt and Bolt of Gransax, and then also try to continue pressuring the Phantom here. And I would just wanted to mention that in case you don't know, the Thunderbolt Ash of War does come as a projectile, even though it looks like it comes above your head, so it doesn't have the same attack pattern as something like Rain of Arrows, which does kind of show up above your head regardless of the line of sight your opponent has on you. Thunderbolt acts as a projectile, so if there's something in between you and your opponent, then it won't connect with you. So that's just something to be aware of, even though it doesn't look like a projectile. That's how it functions within the game. So I was able to take out the Phantom, and then once the Phantom was down, it was just a very quick one-on-one, and that's kind of where the Claws really shine, is just one-on-one situations. They're so strong. You'll be able to poise break your opponent, deliver a bunch of burst damage, especially if you get that roll catch with the running heavy true combo. It's pretty ridiculous. So there you can just see how quickly I'm able to take care of that Phantom. And this invasion I kept in just because I thought it was kind of funny. So here I go for the parry and the weapon swap, but I haven't set up my menu after restarting the game, so it's not organized. So I hop back into my menu and organize it by order of acquisition, which does give me my Misericorde in the spot that I needed to be in, with one more parry, but then finally get the second one, and I'm able to get the riposte there. So Just a reminder that if you do restart the game, you do need to set up your talismans and weapons back in the order that you want them to be in, but I just thought that was kind of funny because it was just kind of a botching it, but then I was able to kind of get the redemption arc there. So next up we have a 2v1, and this one is all in water, which was pretty much to my benefit. We do have one player using a lightning weapon as well, but since both players aren't, and I really need the burst damage, I am kind of happy to be fighting in the water, and I'm a little less worried about the player with lightning than I am about the player with Moonlight Greatsword, just because that has potential to do so much damage. So I'm kind of trying to roll the player behind me and then get in, burst damage in my windows of opportunity, and I get pretty close here and then make kind of the poor decision of going for a snowball on the Phantom and take a backstab in the process. So that wasn't the right decision. It was kind of the more fun decision, I guess. But, moments like that I think are pretty important if you're going to be doing a Santa Claus cosplay. So I almost get cornered in this rock, but then try to keep my roll timing so I'm not getting hit. And then when they're low on stamina or just between swings, I can go for that jump and get over the rock, and that ends up allowing me to heal. I get the Phantom pretty low on health again, but it's not quite enough. So now I'm just trying to reset, get my health back up, and find another good opportunity. The Phantom's Moonlight Greatsword is now debuffed, so I know that they're either going to be going for another buff soon, and that would be a good thing to punish, or they're just not going to be able to go for their heavy attacks like they did just there, and that allowed me to kind of chase them down. And I think they were out of stamina at that point, which meant that they didn't roll and kind of caught the light attack, which ended up kind of being their downfall. So definitely a nice moment there. If you can kind of keep an eye on the buffs that your players are applying, it can be really to your benefit to know that they're either going to go for a buff again soon, or what they think is going to be a buffed attack won't be. And then we do get kind of a pivot backstab there, which is pretty nice. Definitely wasn't expecting that, but it worked out. So next up we have a 2v2, or 2v1 rather, and this one is going to be kind of a demonstration of why halberds are really strong against claw weapons. So these two had a really good strategy going on where they were just kind of going for continuous light attacks and running light attacks, and it was definitely working out in their favor, but eventually they stopped applying pressure, and that Phantom had pretty much no health, and this person goes for Dragon Breath twice. But that beginning section of the fight, though it was quick, I really felt like I was on my back step, or kind of on my back foot there. Next up, we do have a 2v1, and this one was with the players from earlier, and I walked away from my console for a second there and was AFK and came back just in time to see them go for that Moog Spear Ash of War and roll out of it. So I do have a bit of blood loss buildup, and I'm just trying to, I'm kind of in panic mode, trying to stay alive here and not get murdered by, Moog Spear or the Sword of Night and Flame, which both can do a bunch of damage. What I'm really trying to do here is kind of rush in towards the player with the spear. If you're running backwards away from the player with the spear continuously, you're probably going to get hit. The way the hitbox works is just really good for roll catching, so always kind of like try to be pivoting around the player with a great spear or something, and you'll probably be off to a good start with kind of that strategy. I do manage to get a snowball and hit both of them, which is great. I think I won out on that trade, but then there was some desyncing. Here I quickly switch over to the player using Dragon Breath because I know that I can stance break them, and I end up killing them in the process, and then do manage to get a backstab on the player with Mogwin's Great Spear. So definitely a good moment there, and I don't usually try to kill the host first, but in some cases it just kind of happens. So next up we have a 2v1, and a hunter does get summoned into the world pretty early, and I definitely appreciate their approach. I think they might have liked the Santa Claus cosplay and just kind of let it play out. So the player with the pumpkin head, looks like they don't have any weapons attached, but they do have a cestus on, which is doing quite a bit of damage. So definitely something to look out for. Sometimes you can think that like a player is just messing with you by not having any weapon equipped, and so you'll be less aggressive. But in this case, they do have the spike cestus. You can tell by the blood loss. So definitely a strong weapon, and kind of a mirror to the setup that I'm using, because it's also a fist weapon. But just something to just be aware of is those weapons are very small, but they can do a bunch of damage. And just if you see somebody with just their fists, it's not always an indication that they're just messing with you. So here I kind of go for a long chase down against them, and we do get some basilisks that come in, but the Phantom goes for a pretty heads-up play and starts using Rot Breath, which I think kills most of them. And I think that was a very smart move, just because those can really get in your way, and you can be focused on fighting other people, and then gradually your Blight build-up meter just kind of hits its maximum and you die in the process. So a good move to use Rot Breath there, but I was able to get out of it in the process. And here the chase down kind of continues, where their rolling is pretty well timed, and my build is not amazing for chase downs. It's not bad, but it can be difficult to really, continuously get damage, especially if you're not poise breaking your opponent. So here I'm able to get in a light attack just when they accidentally get stuck up against the pole. And here I go for the full combo with the running heavy and the follow-up neutral heavy, and that does most of their health, and then I'm able to get one quick jumping attack to kind of roll catch them. And the jumping attack heavy is a great roll catch for sure. I think it can frequently just kind of throw your opponent off with the timing, and it just usually works out. And then here we have a little bit of a snowball fight with the host, and I'm able to chase them down after they go for a pot throw that was just a little bit too close. Next up, we can just kind of see the utility of the Cragblade Claws in tight spaces. We have somebody with dual curved swords, and that's typically a pretty strong setup, but they kind of just get shredded immediately by this weapon, especially with the bleed build up. It's pretty formidable. So this build is kind of a joke, but it's also like it's very hard to play against, and I think I felt that a lot, especially at level 100, where the damage output is so high. Obviously it gets even higher closer to meta, but in this context it was kind of staggering how quickly some invasions ended. So here we do have kind of the first instance of Moonveil hitting me and not automatically staggering me. So that was really nice. That's been a change in patch 1.08, where Moonveil's poise damage in the magic part doesn't do as much poise damage, and the blade part now does more. So if you're really up close and personal, you're more likely to get poise broken by Moonblade's Ash of War, or Moonveil, sorry. But in like the kind of distance, you're less likely to, and I think that's really nice. It means getting away is more likely to happen. Also, there you saw that the player with Moonveil did go for a gravity spell behind me, and that was just kind of a nice moment to showcase being able to unlock from your current target and just kind of keep an eye out on what's going on. So if you notice there, I turned the camera back towards the player when I heard the spell coming my way, and that way I could time my roll accordingly. So playing unlocked occasionally is going to be a big way to kind of improve your game, and then if you play unlocked really seamlessly, that's going to bring it to a whole new level. So I'm somewhere in between where I am locked on frequently, but unlocking more is definitely something that I'd like to incorporate. And if you watch really, really good players play, they'll just frequently be locking, unlocking, and they'll get more crits because of it, and it's just really effective. So next up we have our first 2v2. So this fight is going to be involving a overleveled Phantom. So you can see that the overleveled Phantom that I'm kind of chasing down here does have a little symbol next to their name, which indicates that they're being downscaled. So you will see that in the arena sometimes, especially if you're in password-based fights, where sometimes your opponents will have somebody that's overleveled in the context of the arena. So I'm definitely wary of the amount of damage they can do. They have very high poise. I don't think they're really limited at all in terms of weight load, so they must have like very high endurance. And so I'm just trying to stay as aggressive as possible. And this is really going to be a good showcase of how strong the Claws are in one-on-one situations. So the overleveled Phantom starts using Waves of Gold, which is not everybody's favorite thing to see in the context of the arena, just because the desyncing issue is very well known, and if you're playing PvP, you probably have faced it at some point and kind of should know better. So Rudolph over there does a great job of taking out the overleveled Phantom, and then I start coming in against the dual whip player. My build is really good against something like dual whips because while they can poise break you if you get the blood loss buildup, they're very unlikely to poise break you in any other scenario. So me being able to just kind of run in and take advantage of their long attack animation with the claws means that I'm probably going to do pretty well against the whips player. However, the Waves of Gold is kind of forced to be reckoned with, so I do get kind of killed from behind by it, and then Rudolph does go down as well. And we both kind of respawn at similar times, which is pretty nice. So I'm trying to just avoid getting hit by Waves of Gold as much as possible, get my buff off, and just kind of be aware of what's going on, throughout both sides of the arena. So now that I know that this player, they were out of FP, they went for their Waves of Gold attack and weren't able to. So I'm just trying to stay really aggressive against them so I can punish any Waves of Gold attempts that they may bring. There I end up going for a heal when they go for Waves of Gold, and it's allows them to kind of get that attack off. But I'm able to roll into it the second time and avoid the damage and then go for the heavy attack. And at this point, I've switched over to Barbaric Roar as my Ash of War. So another great option. Cragblade is also great. Barbaric Roar gives you some hyper armor that's really nice and also an AR boost. So I think things have kind of started turning in our favor. We have 6 kills total, and they're kind of off the respawn cycle, which means that we're able to do a good job of kind of 2v1ing. So if these weapons are good in one-on-one situations, they're kind of insane in a 2v1 situation where I have a teammate. Here I go for a heavy attack that probably wasn't the call. Eleanor's Pole Blade can bleed you pretty quick, so I do get stun locked out of my attack there, but Rudolph is doing a great job of throwing snowballs and keeping people frostbitten. And then here I find it prudent to switch back over to the overleveled Phantom rather than go for a 2v1 chase down on the dual whips player, and that was definitely the way to go. They kind of wanted to use that shield to do a lot of damage in the process, but I was able to just kind of continuously stun lock them and manage to kill them. So Rudolph has pulled out the dual whip setup as well, and I think that's a wise move. Having a weapon like he has, like the Winged Horn, is just not going to be a really effective strategy against dual whips. So using dual whips on his own is a good way to face it, and he does a good job there. In that moment there, when the overleveled Phantom went for Giant's Flame Take Thee, I think I had some iframes in the air, which was very, very clutch. I was able to land a jumping attack and just kind of keep up the pressure and not really get the burst damage that player was going for. So aggression within the context of the arena, I think, is just so important. If you really let people cast spells or go for incantations that are going to be really strong, then you're frequently going to be on your back foot, and it's going to be hard to find windows of opportunity within that context. But I think that's something that both Ice Estes and I do really well, and why we work so well as a team together is just continuously apply pressure in any opportunity we have. So you can see here that he comes in to help me out a little bit. They go for Waves of Gold, and I land a jumping attack, which stun locks them before they can get it off. And then here, just the claws versus the whips. There's kind of no opportunity to win for that player, just because the poise damage they're going to be doing is so low, and the burst damage that I have with my weapon is so strong. So we do manage to get one more kill in the last moment there, and Ice pulls out the Ancestral head, which I thought was a pretty good way to finish things off. And next up we have another 2v2, and this is going to be against Wednesday cosplay from the Addams family, as well as Rivers of Blood user. The Wednesday cosplay is going to be another overleveled Phantom, and they have potential to do huge damage. So I managed to knock them out of the air. They are very much going for a low vigor, high damage output build, and it really is a problem anytime they start getting stun locked, because these weapons can do so much damage so fast, and if especially against a player that's not wearing very heavy armor, they're more likely to get bled more quickly because their resistances are very low. So here I try to stay aggressive and managed to get another quick kill on Wednesday, which definitely was kind of the approach to bring against somebody with really high damage output like that build. And Rudolph does a great job of kind of keeping the Rivers of Blood player at bay, and just allowing me to continuously pressure Wednesday Addams, who does have, dragon spells and stuff that could really take up the arena and kill us both quickly. So it may seem like I'm kind of shredding that build, but they do have a lot of damage output potential. So you'll see in a little bit they start going for the Magma Curve Sword Ash of War a little bit more, and it's definitely effective and something to be kind of wary about because it has lots of stun lock potential. So here I get caught in that Magma Blade attack, and I go for a parry, which was probably not the call. I'm not even sure if you can parry it or not, but I thought I would try once we had a little bit of a lead, and they do a great job of just kind of depleting my HP extremely fast. And you saw some Dragon Breath on screen, so that's kind of like, that's what can happen if you make a mistake and don't continuously apply pressure to players like this. So I kind of learned from the first time when they used Magma Blade, and I backed off pretty early. Rudolph does a good job of getting a jumping attack in there and then following up with a nice quick whip attack. So those two things paired together, you get the burst damage of the Winged Greathorn as well as the range and quick damage associated with the whip. So very smart play, I think, by Rudolph. And we've at this point switched players. So I'm now going after the Rivers of Blood player, and I'm not super concerned about this because their damage output isn't super high. So I start going for parries. We're up quite a bit of points at this point, and I go for 2 parries. If you whiff 1 parry, you should really stop, but sometimes it's important to just kind of mess around and have fun. So I go down to the Rivers of Blood player there, and I would say that was entirely my just kind of hubris in the moment, and something that was, just kind of funny and totally fine. They've kind of used the stairs as a place to hang out, and I'm quickly able to go after the Rivers of Blood player and get a couple light attacks, which manages to take them out. And then here I begin just applying kind of a presence-based pressure while I let Estes take care of Wednesday. And then this was probably one of my favorite moments in our 2v2s together. I finally get that parry that I was looking for, managed to get the riposte, and simultaneously Rudolph manages to grab the backstab. So just a really funny moment there. And here you can also see how much damage I just took from a little bit of Dragon Fire from Wednesday. So that's the damage output I've kind of been talking about. And they did a great job of using the heads-up approach of jumping off the stairs to get a little extra height for that Dragon Breath. But I can also jump off the stairs and kind of grab a jumping attack as well. So, trying to understand what your opponents are doing and just kind of mirror the play can sometimes work out in your favor if you have the opportunity to do something like that. So I'll take this moment now as these kind of invasions wind down a little bit to just talk about this build. So I think I might have mentioned throughout the showcase that I did get some hate mail for it. Somebody called it meta, that I was, taking advantage of, the newest tech. I made this build, in October originally, so claw weapons have always been something that I like, and fist weapons too. And now they're strong, and I think people are kind of, reconciling with that. The true combo with the heavy attack is it can do a lot of damage. It's high burst damage, but I'm not sure that it's ever gonna replace the dual lance setup or something. A jumping attack with dual lances is definitely going to be doing more damage than probably the full true combo associated with the running heavy that you need to have enough stamina to go for a follow-up heavy attack. And you also have to poise break your opponent. So you can absolutely just kind of shred people with this build, but it's not as just outwardly easy as something like Moonveil or dual lances. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody's support. And if you do have any build recommendations, definitely let me know. Also, as an added treat, I've included this clip that me and Iced Estes ended up getting in the process of just kind of messing around and having fun with our different builds. So yeah, I hope you enjoy.